What is an object? In a physical world, an object is something that's tangible. It has a specific purpose that can only be served when it has its features, right? For example, let's take a smartphone, a tablet, computer, keyboard, air conditioner, television. All of these are objects with specific or distinct functions. Let's pick a phone. Like to call somebody, you need a keypad. It's a feature that enables the dialing function. Let's pick TV. To change a channel, we use a remote, and the TV needs a receiver to actually interpret that remote signal and perform the action of changing channel. So all these are happening in the physical world, but when you're being a software engineer, you usually dilute those physical objects in the software thing. So let's go in the software realm about a concept called API. So you all know that like API is like an application programming interface. So it's just like a service or a specific function that is to enable discussion or interaction between two software systems. Just like physical objects, APIs also has something called attributes, which translates to features, and also methods, which actually act on those attributes to do a specific thing. Let's say you're designing an app and you are asked to request some information from the user, and you have a field which is attribute or a feature called user ID. As the user enters his ID and completes the form and hits on submit, you need to collect that ID, you need to collect that information and store it somewhere in the database. So now there will be a method hidden under the submit button, which is like, let's say I'm making things up, which is get user data. As user hits on that submit button, it usually fetches the information and stores it in the attributes that are actually there within the API, and will send those attributes to the database, which actually stores them in some form of tables or depending on what type of database it is, right? So in above all, what I'm trying to say is when you think of an object in the rest of the course, think that that object, whatever it is, has a features which translates to attributes, and it has some methods, right? And using these two, they interact with other objects. So that's how we understand stuff. And as we're just going to understand the classes, you want to generalize this idea and also be able to digest the idea that object is something that have attributes and methods, and they actually use both of them to communicate with other objects. Now that we have generalized the idea of objects, let's delve into understanding classes. So what is a class? Class is like a blueprint or a template that actually defines the structure and behavior of the objects. Just like a physical object has got some features, and by considering those features it can perform some sort of a function. Class actually gives, or I mean gives that both features and you know methods that object will have, like it will give it as a package, right? Let's consider like a phone class, right? That phone class might have attributes like keypad, which will allow us, so that's considering the future, right? That allows us to dial. So when we use the method dial, or when you're saying dial, what it means is any phone that is created from that class will use the keypad feature to do a function called dialing someone. Let's pick one more example: TV class. This class will include, let's say, attributes like receiver and methods like change channel. So any TV created from that class, right? What happens is it uses the receiver feature to interpret the remote signal and change the channel's details. So far, if you wanna see the pattern here, it is basically saying that a class literally bundles, or it actually packs both the attributes of that and the methods of that class together, so that the methods can easily act upon the attributes and data to do or to perform actions that actually reflect a real world object. So this is like trying to generalize this. Like if you want to extend it to one more example of API class, as I already said, let's say you create an app and you have a form where you have attributes like user ID, where user is supposed to enter his email ID. Now And you have methods like get user details, like which is basically a method that is hidden under the submit button. So any specific API endpoint created from this class will have that user ID, which means once you created that, like once you created a class just to fetch user details, right? That class can be reused to create multiple objects of the same type. So you can go ahead and say, I want to implement this for my app number one, app number two, app number three. You can use the same class, but you can extend it to multiple objects, right? Let's pick one more thing for product API. So let's say the class might include attributes like product ID and methods like get product info. So a user is browsing your app and he's interested in a product and he thinks like, I wanna get, uh, I wanna see what exactly is the product. Now he's gonna click on the product. Now what it does is at the back or the class, class could have already bundled the attribute saying like upon clicking, what it means is he's trying to get the user details. It goes and fetch that product info and it displays to the user. So these predefined features, these features are already defined within the class. You just have to call them to convert them to an object. So all these makes an object-oriented programming language more robust, easy to implement, and solve really complex problems. Now that we have generalized the idea of class and objects, so in this we are going to see, now we're going to look at how we can create objects from a set of predefined, like from a class which has predefined features and attributes or attributes. And we can actually act upon those attributes using the methods that are actually part of that class. The, the key takeaway from that is that that class has already a structure, which means the structure is actually a combination of attributes plus methods. And each attribute has got values. In real time, like when you're doing programming, usually that data comes from when you can collect it from a user or you manually type as we actually go ahead and create some objects in Python in coming videos. But for now, let's focus on the attributes. So you have six attributes: color, engine, doors, make, transmission, and engine type. So color, you have four colors. Engine, you can see four variants. You have two door, four door. You have paint object, update engine, show fuel level, change engine, change gear. So if you look at on the right hand side, I created first object car. Very simply, what I did, I picked up, I used attribute called color. From that, I picked a value and I said a red colored 2 liter 4 door diesel engine with a automatic transmission. So I clearly utilized um, all the attributes, and I created an object called car1. So what I did, I used the values from the attributes to create that particular car with the features that are at our disposal. Now, the user comes to you and says that, hey, I want to switch my color to green. Now, what you do is in real life, you take the order, you send it to the workshop, and you actually repaint the entire car. But in programming, it's very simple. What you do, that class already got a method called paint. Now you're going to call that method and say that, hey, can you change the color of the car from red and create a new object called green? You know that we can sell the red car, or I mean, we can actually change that color to green so that the customer gets what's he want. Now, what does paint do is paint goes and acts, takes that color as an color attribute, it acts on the color attributes, and it literally changes the color from red to green. And next day, the customer comes again and says, I want to upgrade my engine to from 2 liter to 3 liter. Now, the upgrade method, which is already upgrade engine, which is actually part of that class already, goes and acts on the engine size and it changes a 2 liter engine to 3 liter. Show fuel level, this is like a customer feature. So what we do is when designing car, we want to show how exactly is the how much is fuel left in the car. So even though I didn't make write out the attribute, but imagine that there is an attribute that says fuel indications, right? Now this show fuel level will actually show how much fuel is left in the car. Again, if the user comes and says that I want to change my car to from a gasoline to hybrid, you can literally switch the car. I mean, basically using the change method, change engine function. Change gear is like you can switch between automatic or transmission. The key takeaway is here in this part of the video is that you focus on how the methods are actually tied down to attribute itself, and each attribute has a series of values. By picking one value or a combination of values, you can create multiple objects. Just basic combinations, right? You can actually pick red 2 liters 2-door BMW automatic manual. You have a car, and upon that you can actually act with some methods on that data that you actually inputted, and you can literally play with that object. So I didn't include some basic things like move a car or something, but the overall understanding from this should be is that class has attributes and methods, or it is bundling them both so that the user can work with it easily to create some real-time objects or objects that reflect a real world objects. In the next, we'll be as we progress, we'll be looking at some of the terminologies about that you should actually be comfortable with when I'm talking in the rest of the series of the video. Now that you have a fair understanding of class and objects, for the rest of the video or videos, I want you to be comfortable about when I say class, you have to imagine that it is like a predefined template or rules or that is used to create objects, and it has predefined objects, predefined attributes and methods. When I say object or instance of a class, I mean the same thing. So they mean the same thing. I'm referring to an object, and each object is created has its own attributes and methods, and literally one object can have three attributes, one more object can have four attributes and five attributes, and so on and so forth, right? Implant these two ideas in your mind as you move forward, and we'll be just looking at some of the summaries and also how these works in the oops paradigm of some of the programming languages. So now that you have a strong hold of classes and objects, if you want to summarize the entire video in two things, this is how it's going to be. Classes are like a blueprint that actually bundles data and functionality together, and methods of the class will definitely act on those attributes to perform a certain action. So this is like two ideas that will actually that you should take with you for the rest of the videos to make the understanding of class and objects in a much easier way. Now, if you just look in the OOPS paradigm, like you can think of like every language, very object-oriented language, everything that you create inside that language is an object. Literally, if you're typing a number, that is actually an object of a certain class. Get used to this terminology that if you're creating a variable and storing some data in it, that variable that you created is actually pointing to an object. That's a different concept. You'll see in the next video, in the following videos. But the overall takeaway is that everything that you do in an object-oriented programming language, it can be as simple as typing a number to writing a series of big algorithms. You're actually creating objects in every single line that belongs to a certain class. The next video, I'll be arguing with you that you already know classes and objects. If you already worked with some of the data structures like list or integers or data types like integers, float or something, I'll be arguing in the next video that you already know it. Just because you didn't explore other way of understanding it, I'll be showing with you how you actually know it, and also I'll try to explain as much as I can behind the scenes of that, some of the common data structures that we will be using in Python as we develop our sense of classes and objects. See you in the next video.